No.
I have enough whenever I can have them away, then I'll gladly choose.
So,
Hello.
hello everyone.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for being here. I'm Simon. I'm the co-curator of the exhibition Campfires with Violeta. I thought I'd perhaps do a quick introduction about the exhibition for those who don't know yet exactly how this project came about, and then we would enter into the discussion that we are proposing to have today. So Campfires is a project that Violeta and I initiated 3 years ago in 2018 with a third curator, Khalid from New York. And we wanted to do a research project and an exhibition that would consider ways in which artists, but not specifically visual artists, also performers, singers, activists, dancers, use their body as a tool to challenge norms about identity. And we decided to articulate this research around the concept of camp as a way of exaggerating or making things exaggerated, excessive, theatrical, rather than speaking directly about identity or about queerness, for instance. So our idea was that camp as a mode of relating of creating aesthetic works could be potentially a mode of resistance against those norms, a way to misappropriate, hijack certain aesthetic codes, cultural codes, and to turn them into something different, or to empty them out of their meaning. And so we gathered 18 artists and showed video works or video recordings of performances of them in an exhibition that we did for the first time 2 years ago in Buenos Aires, in UV, an exhibition space and an artist house that Violeta was running in Buenos Aires at the time, where there was an exhibition space in the living room, and then the house had 6 artists living in it and working in it. They had their studio, and it was a queer community. And we decided to, and we wanted since the beginning to bring the exhibition to Zurich, and we're very happy that Ariana and Linda accepted to host the exhibition and to co-produce it. And then we thought about how to show this exhibition in Zurich. In Buenos Aires, it was in a community, it was in a very communitarian space, and our question here for Zurich was how can we create a sense also of perhaps also community through the exhibition. And the idea that we had was to also to decentralize this exhibition and to collaborate with other spaces. So that's why the main part of the exhibition is here at Last Tango, but 3 works are shown at Tan's house on the other side of the river, and 3 other works are shown at Cibelle at the Rote Fabrik. And this idea of collaborating with different spaces was perhaps for us a way of reflecting on how to create an exhibition that wouldn't be in one single place, that wouldn't create, wouldn't be like, somehow like the idea to break down the hierarchy between the public and the works, and to have the public having to navigate different places. But then on top of that, our idea by bringing together different spaces was also to try and materialize some links that already existed, some bonds that already existed between different spaces. And here especially looking at a sort of what we could call maybe a queer ethics that already connects those spaces that work in a certain direction. And the idea of Campfires here in Zurich was also to materialize for the duration of this exhibition those links that already exist throughout the city, not only in these 3 different exhibition spaces, but also with everyone that we're collaborating with for the public program that we're also putting together as part of the exhibition, which includes talks, but also parties, screenings. So we're having a screening collaboration with the Fine Arts Department at the Zella, but we're also we were also advertising the Lila Fest Queer Festival that was happening at Hotel Fabrique. We co-hosting the party organized by the collective Oil Productions from Lausanne and Valérie Redding on the 16th of October at Clubraum at the Hotel Fabrique as well. So we're really trying to here collaborate with figures and entities that work in a similar direction. And so that's why we thought it's maybe interesting, or it's actually not maybe, it's interesting to have a discussion with people involved for closer and nearer or farther to the exhibition, to have a discussion about what it is that we're doing when we're trying to also curate a project that reunites or that creates community bonds. Thinking also about the etymology of the word curating, which is curare, taking care of. And so I think it's very important in the context of this talk to think about what is it to curate, what is it to take care of something, not only to create content for the public, but also to take care of something from within or for a community and for a group. And so as speakers we have Violeta, whom I already introduced, who is the co-curator of Campfires. I'm going to read just her biography. So Violeta was born in Santa Fe in Argentina. She works as a curator, producer, teacher, lawyer, and performer. She is a member of the Sirenes Errantes collective, with which she has recently participated in the Berlin Biennial. Since 2015, Violeta has directed UB Studios, an art residency, research, and exhibition project where more than 60 solo and group exhibitions, presentations, and parties have been held. She has collaborated extensively with galleries, institutions, and projects throughout Argentina, as well as Latin America, Europe, and the United States. Violeta's curatorial work includes MD at the ICBC Foundation Buenos Aires, LCD LSD LED at the Museo de Arte Contemporáneo Montevideo, Subversiones in KMO.2 Gallery in Puerto Rico. Her work has been featured in Art Forum, Art News, Terremoto, and more magazines. She's currently the artistic director of the Ama Amoedo Foundation's residency program and curating the exhibition Campfires at Last Tango in Zurich. She lives between Buenos Aires and Punta del Este in Uruguay. About UV, in 2015, UV emerged as a house, gallery, work project, participatory exhibition space. Challenging and inspiring spirits allowed people to create and believe in their own way of exploring art in collaboration, combining friendship with work, precariousness with charisma, ambition with community. They made more than 60 exhibitions, parties, workshops, and performances until 2019. In 2020, UV decided to transform, ending the UV as a gallery, leaving aside the commercialization and the permanent staff of artists and becoming an office for projects with new extensible format. UV Project Office is presented as a space to investigate, dialogue, and collaborate with artists, curators, managers, galleries, institutions, friends, and other shows around the world. Then we have Marc Streit. Marc is the founder and artistic director of Zurich Moves Festival for Contemporary Arts, Practice, and Performing Arts. He sees himself as a host, networker, producer, and organizer in the field of contemporary performance and dance. His projects are each at the intersection of art and life. He likes to challenge himself by dealing with discourse in ways that destabilize our normative ideas. The viewer is to be freed from his passive role and perceived as a co-inhabitant of a space. Through the vulnerable body, the uncertainty and the fragility of performing art, socially relevant issues are made tangible and new perspectives are created. With his initiatives, he wants to bring people together and promote real encounters. Marc Streit realizes projects locally, nationally, and internationally, and creates collective experiences that free things from their invisibility in order to give them dignity and recognition. Since 2011, he has been part of the team at Tanzhaus Zurich, where he served as Deputy Artistic Director from 2014 until September 2019. Since October 2019, he has coordinated the dramaturgy pool at Tanzhaus Zurich and works as freelance curator, dramaturg, lecturer, and artistic consultant. Likewise, he is engaged as a guest curator at the Gharaballi Zurich since September 2020 and founded Imbricated Real together with Simon W. Together, they are fully behind the idea that art has the idea that art as a life practice cannot be individualistic but exists only in conversation with others. While the singularity of artistic position enriches our experiences, these are only relevant and understood through their composition within the frame and reflection of society as a whole. Marc is a guest lecturer at the Tellalica BA Acting and at the Stockholm University of the Arts School of Dance and Circus in the master program choreography. And
Not circus.
not well, and Marc is also the founder, was organizing the Kant parties between 2012?
12 to about 16?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Kant parties were very important queer events in Zurich, for those who don't know and haven't attended any of them, that reunited really a community of queer people. And I think for me, it was historically a very inspiring moment because it's one of the rare moments where I had the feeling that the queer community and the art community were coming together physically, which I feel is something that doesn't happen that often in the Zurich landscape. And Marc has been instrumental in bringing campfires to Zurich and putting us in touch with people, especially with dance house and making that collaboration possible. And it's also why we're inviting Marc here. And then Ivy, who
Thank you.
who is participating in the exhibition, showing her work upstairs, which you might have seen, who was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, holds a BA in Fine Arts and Performance from the Tellalica in Zurich, and a BA in Social Communication from, and now you need to help me with the name of the university, an MB Morumbi.
Yeah.
Ivy is a developer of practices and performative roles in dance, music, and theater performance for small and big stages. They are a natural shapeshifter, reimagining and reconceptualizing femininity, gender, social, and race through disidentification in a post-colonial perspective. Ancestrality and spirituality are reshaped and envisioned in queer futuristic pieces where the artist reclaims and questions their space in our apocalyptical future. Ivy also produces and headlines inclusive events and parties for trans, non-binaries, and queer of color such as Hella Melanated and Feucht. Under the name Mother Tropical B. Poderosa, they are the leader of the pioneer house of P. Poderosa, first Kiki house in Switzerland. There's more. Since 2017, Ivy has been active in the international Vogue and ballroom scene, where they produce functions, teaches workshop, and develop social practices around this culture. Queer Ball, Queer Function, Poderosa Annual Summer Ball. Their work has been presented in galleries like Per la Moda in Zurich, VBKO in Wien, in theaters like Counterpulse San Francisco, Tanzhaus Zurich, in museums like the Museum of Image and Sound in Sao Paulo, festivals like the Queer Biennial Los Angeles, Zurich Moves Zurich, in the opening of the Swiss Pavilion at the Venice Biennial 2019, and most recently in Theater Spektakel this year in Zurich. So yes, so Ivy, as I said, is part of this exhibition. It's a bit of a special case because you were not part of the first edition of Campfires. You came especially for this one with a work that you created last year, which is also the newest piece that we're showing in the exhibition, which you realized in the L23 residency, which I was co-organizing last year during lockdown, during the COVID time. We benefited, we could have a Zwischennutzung, a building that we used last year right by the station, and we offered artist studio to people who didn't have access to a working space during the lockdown, and Ivy was one of the residents, and then created that video during Pride Month, in the residency. And of course, when I saw the video and thought about those connections, it was absolutely logical for me to also ask Alli to include that video in the exhibition and to have this exhibition develop and evolved also across time, creating those connections in Zurich, and especially considering those bonds that are here, because the video was filmed by Lukas, who is already an artist including in the show and who's also the co-founder of the Kant parties. So we have here already all these connections when we're speaking about community.
I was also like a kid of Kant party. Like,
Well, and Evelyn as well.
Yeah, and Evelyn as well.
Yeah.
And also Zurich rules. So I wanted to start with a question to Violeta, because she's perhaps the one who's not as close of this, to this,
She is
this
now.
constellation, but she's becoming. And I wanted to ask you if you did you intend for UV to become a point of reference as it was in the queer scene in Buenos Aires, because you need to understand that UV was really a center of gravity for the artistic queer scene in Buenos Aires. So was that intentional for you, or did it happen organically over time? And how did you choose the first residents that you had in UV, who in fact were the first residents but never left the house and stayed living for 5 years in that house, creating that community around them, that community of queer artists? How did it start, and how did it become that queer point?
Well, a lot of questions. When I started with the project in 2015, when I rent the house, the idea was, because the idea was need a house, so we need a house to make craziness, like performance and party and experiment. And I'm from the performance, I know from the visual art, so my experience was more in theater and alternative space. And when we make my performance with my friend Loli Lauti, it's a duo of performance from Buenos Aires, we said, well, we never have a place to make these things. So we rent a house. I said, well, this house has a big living room, but not big like this. So this is big for me. And I said, well, this place for artists, I think it's necessary to have a place for the artists have a studio or a place to live. So I don't know what I think when I rent a house. So I rent. My father and mother say, well, I help a little, like the first rent. Say, okay, how to support this house? So we make a lot of party. So sell beer, and with this money pay the rent for a lot of time. And yes, when I start the resident with the place with very loud, we say, well, we prefer artists, and we say, well, like to say, I know 3 guys from Uruguay. It's a collective, Básica TV. It's so young, and it's necessary to come to Buenos Aires to make this performance and the video. I say, well, why not? I only see one video for one artist is showing the exhibition, Emilio Bianchic video. It's a name tutorial. I say, wow, this guy is amazing. So say yes, they come. So they arrive in March in 2015 and stay to end the house. It will start with with parties and exhibition during one day with a lot of TV, something like that, but for one night, because then make the party and you be transformed in a place where the people stay a long time. They come to the exhibition at 6 and it's 4 in the morning and it's dancing in the patio or in the rooftop. While Belén is here, is a friend, an artist from Argentina, and knows very well UV.
Talk about the police.
Well, yes. We have all the exhibition have a problem with the police. They arrive, 5 cars with the police, say, well, only it's a little party here, we are gay and queer, we are safe people, we don't make nothing. Well, but it's time to go out. Well, okay, but yes, in the first, I never think it's a house it's a queer house. The first time I asked this question because my mother said, "Hey, all the artists are gay." Say, can't believe it. You say, yeah, no, people say, no, for me are person. I don't know, it's gay or queer, and say, oh, well. So, yes, I think UV was because we finished the project before the pandemic, this house. It's a safe place for me and for the artists, and I think the people feel comfortable being there a lot of time, and a lot of people say, hey, we made something, on all December we made a big festival of performance, and the name is Perfoot. Belen is participate sometime in this festival, and it's a festival for 4 days, more of 50 or 30 artists. The last one I think is 60 artists, and it's don't have money to pay for the artists, so all the artists made the best because it's kind of Christmas night and make the best dishes to share with the friends. Kind of, yeah. I don't know. I miss this perfect because it's the end of the year and all together como spend 4 days, crazy days with videos and performance. Yes, I don't know what more to say.
Perhaps we move on and then we can come back and have conversation. Wanted to ask so one question to Ivy. So you already had an artistic practice of your own when you founded the House of Ladosha in Zurich, with a clear then community building purpose, right? So how does your individual work as an artist, dancer, performer, and your activities as mother, activist, teacher articulate with one another? And do you compare your role to that of a curator?
Yeah, you know, like everything happened very organically, and okay, so very organically and fast, you know. By the time I finished school and I was trying to do art, this one was like, okay, I give you like come and do some stuff, and so it moves me and this one here. And then we were like, yeah, let's do it. It was like totally crazy stuff that we used to do at this days. Not that we don't do it today, nowadays we still do crazy stuff, but by the time like starting it was like, wow, okay. And then
not only was it a 1 hour show,
it was a 30.
12.
No, from the beginning until the end, it was 30 hours of work. It was a long durational performance, but it was a 30 hours of work that we were done. I was like, it was one of our first performances, and it was like, yeah, go bigger or die. And we didn't know if we were dead at the end of that. It was just like crazy. And from then on, I was like, okay, I think that's it. What I wanted to do. Didn't quite figure out how to. It's very hard to understand where is your place in performance art, you know, especially being like a queer immigrant of color in a country like this. So it was very hard for me to start, and I was like serving tables and doing tricks, you know, for some time until I kind of got it, how it was working. But then our ballroom became bigger and bigger in my life, and I saw that it was coming in the mainstream scene as well. And in ballroom culture we have a say that we say like the mother doesn't choose to birth children, the children choose the time that the mother should be born, you know. And so the scene was like having like amazing talented people here, and they were longing for someone that could just pack them and say like, okay, let's do stuff together because there is a lot of potential. Otherwise all of this potential is gonna be lost and taken into wrong places, you know. Like we know there's a lot of appropriation when we're talking about black culture, and ballroom is an essentially black culture. And as a black person, I felt the pressure to do it, but I was happy to do it, you know, like I feel like this motherly care is so embedded in Latina communities, you know, especially coming from a matriarchal lineage of strong women. And then I just took it, and then I was like, well, now that I'm starting to learn how to do performance, then I also have a house to take care of. And I mean, like, everybody that knows me knows that I'm a bit busy, and I'm always like running around. But I feel like after 2.5 years of house, I'm starting to have a more like a base, you know, where my kids are growing up, and now I have like the father of the house, which is son Helio Poderosa, and he's taking like a great care, and also the princess of the house and the empress of the house. So we have like an hierarchy of power of people in the house that together with me are taking more responsibilities and leaving me more to my artistic practice, you know.
So
And
offloading a bit,
what?
Unloading a bit some of the.
Yes, exactly. And I'm just very happy that I could find humans like this that have also a vision, you know, what ballroom really means for us, what do we want to change within ballroom, how do we want to show from inside to the outside as a community, you know, and they totally understand, you know, like for example, I was in Vienna for Impulse Dance for a month, you know, and they just hosted a ball I came just to present, and now they're getting cocky, and they got invited from Central Bacharach to do another one again, and now, you know, I was like, yeah, you can do it. I mean, like, I don't even need to be there. On the same day I'm having a show in Geneva, so, you know, stuff is working, and I'm even having time to go and walk balls instead of just producing, you know. It's quite hard for you to just work on the scene but never really enjoy. So it's flourishing in the right way, in the right time.
And the second part of the question, this idea of like, because you've used a lot the word taking care of, which is also something Violeta speaks a lot of. She considered this house as like the artist of Uwe as her kids, and she really also calls herself a mother. So I think there are a lot of, you know, overlaps between your house and your house, even though they have different structures. And I was wondering, because you used the expression taking care of, and I was referring to this word of curating that we've really kind of like a bit altered in its meaning, how you relate to that in terms of also in cultural terms, because of course ballroom culture is culture, and it's creating a lot of content. And I think the exhibition we're having here is also really trying to exit the kind of strict sense of visual arts, and really includes a lot of references to party culture, underground culture, nightlife, etc. So I was really wanted to hear about that.
Yeah, producing ballroom and representing this culture, it is somehow an art of curation. You know, when you are producing a function and you're inviting like international judges to come here, there is always a theme, there is always an intention. You invite not just the judges, but people that comes to comment and to sing the ball for you. You invite people to come and give workshops, to teach the children in your area. And all of these people, they also have a vision, they also have a way, they are also artists on their own. and they are coming here to share their art with your community. So in a way, I think it's a curatorial process, of course, and by tapping on your children and seeing what their talents, and like instigating them to come out, to bring this out in the right time, of course. Also as a curator, you need to know when that piece is in the right time, talking with the artist to know when to present. So I think as a mother, you also curate the talents of your children so they can come and walk a ball, and in the future also produce some, and be their own curators, and keep the cycle of life like the Lion King.
Thanks. Marc, thank you for your patience. No, but I think it's good because you'll also be able to react to what Alli has just said, because what's interesting to me is also, you have experience, you have really a lot of experience, and you have experience professionally in the institutional context with dance house, in a more kind of independent, self-managed context with the Zurich Blues Festival, but also in the underground alternative cultural scene with the Kant, for example. And so I was wondering, as a curator, because you also describe yourself as a curator.
Not necessarily, but maybe that's part of the answer then.
Yes. Okay. If you adapt your discourse according to the context where you are working, and also if you're in your experience, if all of these different contexts are equally as productive in terms of precisely of community building and of empowerment, especially with minorities, because I know that that's something in your practice that's very important. And also I think perhaps in relation to what Alli has just explained, it's like suddenly there's this idea of curating, well, not an exhibition, but people, which is meaning taking care of. Because of course etymologically a curator in the art context is the one who takes care, is not the one who creates exhibition, but the one who takes care of artworks in a collection and maintains them and preserves them. In French we have this distinction between conservateur and commissaire d'exposition, exhibition maker. And then this has been shifting in the past decades, this meaning of curator towards exhibition maker actually. And so I was wondering also in regard to this idea of preserving, empowering, taking care of in your activity.
Good question. I think first of all, it always, whatever there is that I have an urgency to do, it always starts from a very personal urgency and something in a way to challenge myself and to push my own limits in a way, because I think especially if you're operating in the in a so-called free scene, you don't have to be, or you can't be afraid of risk. So by taking this risk, the first thing you need to apply in order to bring people on board is to practice care, because you don't necessarily have them anything to offer yet. So you somewhat start a dialogue and a conversation with various people, and along these lines or along the way, things will eventually manifest, and some things don't manifest, and then that's when I usually know that these are the things that are not supposed to happen as an overall thing. So I really always start from a very personal interest or from a very personal perspective. Then I think we need to take apart a little bit the institutional context, the nightlife, and putting together a so-called festival format, because I think they operate on different logics. So the institutional context is very much, there's not so much room for me to explore within that frame. So there is a given structure, there is a given frame that I can challenge and that I can push, and I love doing that, but yet there is somewhat of a limit. Then there is the nightlife, and the nightlife is for me, has always been somewhat pure pleasure in order to run around half naked and have a good time, and through through somewhat these gatherings and through these social moments to get to know people, because I think that's another element which I'm clearly coming from the performing arts as a somewhat of as a professional profile, and there I would say the body is the primary material. So in order to deal with the bodies, you need to be willing to encounter people, and that's, for me, that's the key. Like, I think if I'm at some point no longer capable of encountering the people, and I have realized that coming out of this lockdown has been very challenging. It's somewhat, yeah, it was strange. And only these past few weeks, when I was able to travel again, I all of a sudden realized, like, wow, that's actually what it is, because it gives so much energy, you know? And that, like, this feeding in of energies and this feeding in of things that you encounter out in the world, I think that really is the driving force. And I think also within the practice, I think that's, I was never so much interested in planning long term, also let's say with Zurich Moves, that it grows and it grows and it grows and it transforms itself, and I think that's the most important thing, because we as humans, we grow, and we should allow things to grow and not hold on to some sort of a fixed idea what something should be, but rather go beyond that and imagine new things, you know? And that's also why this role of the curator, I don't know if I did my studies, I got a master's in curating, but I mean, that was along the way. That was one step I somewhat did in order to fulfill my own criteria in a way, you know, to be legit, to present myself in this role. But that was really pretty much it, you know. And I think this idea of curating, as you, or as all of you explained earlier on, it's so much more, and I rather focus on all these other things than the simple title of curating. I don't know, I might have lost complete track, but
No, I think, yeah.
It's very interesting.
I think something that I gather from your answer to all of your three answers is also that to cater to community, there needs to be a structure, but there needs to emerge a new structure. I feel like this is something that is also common to the three. You've created a house, you've created a house, you've created, you know, your
the house of Zurich Moves.
Yeah. So I think there's something here in the line that I feel like, or the way you said, you know, an institution, you can challenge the structure of the institution, but the structure is pre-existing, and you somehow need to adapt. And so what I read in between the line of what you said is somehow to really cater to do some community building work, perhaps working from an institution is not the best thing, because the structure already exists, and then it's for the people who enter it to adapt, and not the structure is adapting to the community you need to serve. So I think that's perhaps like a first aspect. I don't know if someone wants to react to that. I'm kind of like sensing, which perhaps is also something we did with campfires, in the sense that somehow we got invited to do the exhibition at Last Tango, but it was not enough to just do it in Last Tango. We thought, okay, we need to create also a circuit that is also new, it's novel, because that's the exhibition we want to do, you know. So perhaps, I don't know if someone wants to react to that observation.
Maybe I would like to add something. I think, like, also, you mentioned the initiative that Simon and I are working on with Imbricated Real, and within, like, while shaping this new initiative, which is very much something that is somewhat a counter, somewhat of a counter movement to the whole institutional context that we are well familiar with, especially in the performing arts, that have a history which goes back, I'm talking about the free scene, that goes back about 40 years. And therefore has so much history which it carries, and in order to somewhat get rid of this history, or we're not necessarily trying to get rid of history, but in order to be able to shape something which is in the now, it is easier, I believe it is easier to build something up from scratch than trying to fit that in something which is existing. And this is something I have been observing while working in institutions, how difficult it is to change these mechanisms of the institution. And I think that's also why it has been so, for me there was no other way than creating also your own stuff, you know, because that, it would then be the stuff that didn't find a space, for example.
It's also a bit of a pessimistic or a dark outlook in a sense though, because all of those freestanding institutions we've been talking about from, let's say, 40 years ago, Fabrique, Tanzhaus, they were all grassroots institutions that started from scratch. We thought they were doing something new and now and were, you know?
Yeah.
So I mean, the question stays in the air, like how do we continue to transform without this idea of progression into settled, stable institution format?
I think in my case, when I think about ballroom, there's a history of ballroom making and how it started because the system failed us. The system failed queer and trans people of color, and we suddenly found ourselves in the streets and poor mental health and everything. So we needed to cater for each other. So it's I think it's also somehow in talking about ballrooms, a necessity to have a family, you know, to have someone who is there for you and that can just look at you and say like, hey, I see something in you that the system didn't told our fathers or our parents to tell this to us, you know. And yeah, it's basically almost like anarchic, you know, denying everything that it was there because nothing served us, you know, so we needed really to take on our hands to do stuff, you know. Nowadays it's a bit different, but at the same time not, because you know, like now with the gay rights movements and trans rights and everything, so a lot of people are more accepting. Thank you. Accepting of the whole thing. I also like, you know, we just can get married here in Switzerland, so go figure. But it's still like a thing of holding space, the space that we created, and what is coming after this, because, you know, like in the end, after everything is said and done, and after all the movements, you know, and all the fights are done and everything, we're still humans and we are full of flaws. And ballroom in itself, after so long, it's creating also their own monsters, and then it's again the time to rethink and how can we destroy this to build something new, you know, with all the respect, you know, because this was beautiful, but it doesn't serve some people anymore. How can we go after this? And that is where I also find myself now in the middle, being a very young mother of a scene. How I'm going to teach my children better.
So I think your video is very much about that, right?
Yeah.
I feel like you're visiting this glamour of ballroom and drag, then this, and you're walking right through this space, and then you have this huge graffiti that appears behind you that said Pride was a riot, so is a riot. And then you have these posters that says Black Queer, Black Trans Lives Matter, and it's something that really strikes me, that you associate the glamour and the activism, which is perhaps, or for me, is a reminder that this culture is not just entertainment. It's not RuPaul's. It's not all that. It stems from something that is activistic, and it's not because it's activist that it cannot be glamour. And I think that's also very much something we're trying to say about the exhibition. It's not because it's political that it cannot be humorous, it cannot be funny, it cannot be campy. And I think that's why also the video is so strong, because you're revisiting that also here. That's how I see it, at least. For those who haven't seen the video, please have a look after the talk. And yes, I also perhaps wanted to discuss, and if we're speaking about structure and building structure, and also there's this idea, perhaps there's this one question, as you said, Simone, like there's Tanzhuo, there's Montefabric, but meanwhile they've become institutions, right? So what, and you were speaking about what comes after. And so what do we do? Because when you say you worked at Tanzhuo and you're saying I need to create my own stuff, so do we need to tear those institutions down, even though they came as a community building thing, and build new ones? Can they change? That's a big question, because we cannot simply accumulate more and more and more institutions, or like grassroots initiatives that turn into institutions, right? But as you said, it's very difficult to change things from the inside. And so there's also this big question of the self-sustained, or self-managed, or the independent space, right? And there's like, I have a bit this question, I'm thinking about it also because I'm freelancing, I don't have a space of my own. If self-management, self-sustaining, independence is rather a condition or a consequence of this alternative mode of cultural production that tends toward community building. Is it because we want to do some community building work that we have to be self-sustaining? Or do we have to, or you know what I mean? And if I can need to reformulate, there's a bit this idea, where does this kind of independence or this kind of self-management stand in this equation? And also like what happens when suddenly precisely the initiative, the grassroots initiative or the grassroots project becomes ossified with a structure, with a board, and what happens afterwards, and what happens to this, which was formerly well self-managed. I don't know.
Wow.
I mean, you have jokers, you can also just pass on the question. But
I think, well, when we are independent or freelancer, we have a proper house, it's necessary to work in collaboration with other people. It's like a necessary condition to produce. In my case, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, it's different from here because there are institutions, there are supports, there are money, there are only people. So, and force and bodies. All the artists put all the body for make an artworks or a performer or a party. Everything is about body. So, in my experience, make art or make the UV house is possible with the collaboration of the artist, of course, curator, and of course some collector to understand we need some help to survive because don't have a politician, ni state, ni institution who give money to survive. So for me, I don't conceive other kind of make art or make produce something without other people. For me it's interesting only produce with in conversation with other people. Alone is horrible for me. I miss a lot of my house because in the last lockdown in Buenos Aires was so hard, so long. I feel so alone in my apartment. I would say, wow, I miss all my friends. I miss the energy and the hugs and everything. So, yeah, I think it's necessary the collaboration to survive.
I think what's super important is what you mentioned is the geographic location and what resources you have available through funding, for example, or through an institutional landscape. And yeah, I mean that it creates a whole different context, obviously. I guess operating in Buenos Aires and creating something without any sort of public funding is a completely different way of realizing any sort of project, you know. And I'm not saying neither one is better or worse, but it's just a very, very different reality, you know. I think you're busy with completely different ideas and things, and you're facing other challenges if you operate in either one of the contexts, you know.
Yeah, I think the context is so important because yes, it's so different when I arrive here and see the institution or how. Well, for example, Campfire was so different. We made in Buenos Aires, and here in Buenos Aires we find all the TV and screen for our friends. Come and say, hey, give me a TV, please. Como other galleries, and so, for example, Simon was hosted by the collector for 2 months in their house, and other collector pay a ticket for Kerry to New York. So we say, hey, I need your help. And yes, it was so funny because the people come to see the exhibition and say, why, this exhibition is for a museum. They say, no, it's not for a museum, it's for a house, because it's for us, not for some people. We need to see this in this context. So, yeah, when we...
I have to say, though, that we also had lots of friends who lent us a lot of gear, and it was a similar kind of like hollering at people to lend us. So we were happy people didn't have to watch their tatort on Sundays for the next
Yes. No, and here when I arrived, well, this place is super amazing, and Linda Ariane como help us like a mother too, and support us como and make all the installation. Ariane and Linda, and it was super amazing because when I arrived, the exhibition is started, and I said, wow, it's amazing, como everything is working, everything is perfect, como the TV are, I think it's a lot of work. And then when I see Tianzhuo, I say, wow, this too, and Shanghai say, como, wow, como everything. And it's interesting because here we work together with a lot of institutions and space and people, and I don't know, I made this guy today before this talk. I say, wow, we send a lot of email, but we are a person. So I say, well, it's interesting. In different content, but I think the essence, the spirit of the exhibition is the same. Or depend on the content, but in this case,
But it's interesting what you're saying about funding also, I think, because precisely I feel like sometimes when the project is really directed at a certain community, a certain public, rather than the general public, it suddenly risks falling out of the funding categories. Suddenly, for funding bodies, for whether public or private, because it's addressed principally to a certain public, it can become problematic to fund it. And so there I see also some kind of potential friction in terms of creating projects that are specifically dedicated to community building, because they can suddenly become not as available cultural products. And so there I think there's something interesting to discuss also and to evaluate in terms of cultural production. Because we've encountered such issues, and I'm sure you have as well in some moments. So I don't know if someone has some experience to share, wants to perhaps share tricks how to sort of communicate better about this, because I think a lot of people here in the public are also interested, because that's things they want to do or they want to work in this direction.
Do you have anything to say?
You start.
Okay. Did you want to?
No.
And she takes the phone and asks for help. So.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 2016 when you did the long durational performance with Valerie, and that was exactly the 1 year where the city of Zurich all of a sudden decided not to give any money. Whereas before you could always count on about 50,000, maybe 55 if it was an amazing year. And yes, things like that still happen, and it is still a gamble every single time, because you apply and you make a proposal, and this proposal is every single time completely a new context somewhat. Of course, it is nourished by, once again, by the performing arts and bodies and people involved. So it's not all of a sudden, let's say, an exhibition, but as an example, this year was supposed to be the 10th anniversary of the festival, and the funding was given, but it was also like my proposal that I wrote that was so extremely open, so it could have literally been anything. And they jumped on board, the funders, and what we did in collaboration with Esther Epstein, Laga, Jerry Ann Davis, and myself, we put together a publication which then showcased, I mean, that was for me the physical experience of building networks and building and merging communities and yeah, like really the whole shebang. Like we sat there, and shortly before Christmas we decided that it is going to be a publication, and it could have been, we said like, okay, performances in shop windows, in parks, on streets, street rallies. I had this idea of a Vogue ballroom catwalk along Bahnhofstrasse, whatever. It ended up being this publication. We can still do it. And yeah, I mean super precarious. But I think out of this uncertainty and this whole precarious ways of realizing these projects, that's also what makes you strong. Makes you grow together in a way, and the bond is therefore then so strong, you know. So it's sometimes I'm in a way fed up, and I'm sometimes asking myself like, why do I have to do this over and over and over? But then there is exactly these moments that then there is a new constellation and a new idea that somewhat manifests, and you yeah. And of course, I guess the more you do things like that, the more you also build the trust that these things will happen, you know. I mean, we've had this conversation many times, and that's what it is. Even though you can't quite imagine or can't quite grasp what it can be then at the very end, but you actually know, fuck, it is going to happen. I don't know how, but it is, right?
Oh yeah. I have yet another view on the topic we're talking about. When we're talking about producing stuff for a niche, for a community, and not getting the proper fund because it's to community, and it comes from the corner of producing black art as a black artist, you know. It's very hard sometimes for you to put out on a word that it is full of symbolism of your culture, and you know that people are gonna like it, you know. But how can we frame this in a way that you can get proper funding, you know, like this is very hard without compromising your own culture in it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's very hard. Like, and I'm not talking about ballroom, because ballroom, I don't even go to the city talking about ballroom. They don't even know what Vogue and ballroom is, you know what I mean? Like, of course, with time, I think it's gonna happen, and whatever we produce with ballroom, it's like clubs and institutions and so on that already adequated that for us. But whatever, you know, like to go to the city to ask for that is like, I don't even know how to start. But I'm talking about like performances that I produce for myself as an artist, as a practice, you know, like it's very sensitive and very hard for me how to keep, how you said, my integrity, and saying, because you literally have to say, how are we gonna sell this?
Yeah.
How are we gonna sell this? And I'm like, how am I gonna sell this? I'm like, I'm not here talking about, don't know, plants and whatever. I'm talking about black culture, you know. I want this to sell. I want people to know and come and respect and you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's so hard, and that's why it takes so long to write something that is meaningful, and that as you and that once you finally get funding, you can present out there and put your face out there, you know. It's hard.
Perhaps I can share here the experience that we have with campfires, that we've tried to think, okay, this is an exhibition that's accessible to everyone. Everyone can come, already in Buenos Aires, but then also here in Zurich. But then the question was, who comes how to the exhibition? And when we did it in Buenos Aires, as Violeta said, the exhibition space of UB used to be in the living room of the house. But what we did when we installed the exhibition was to distribute the works throughout the entire house. So you would have a video in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in the basement, on the rooftop, literally everywhere. And so our idea was a bit philosophically to project, to think of these artworks as inhabitants of the house, just like the artists who were living there, and the people who were visiting the exhibition as guests to the house. And so that created this situation that the people living in the house and the people used to frequent the house would feel absolutely comfortable to get up a flight of stairs, enter a bathroom, perhaps Lulo was just brushing his teeth next to him while you were looking at the work, right? Whereas like for other people that might have been quite an alienating experience. And so our idea was that this exhibition would be extremely familiar to the people familiar with the space. Whereas like for the people unfamiliar, it was not impossible, but it was a bit challenging. And we tried to, in this way, to revert the hierarchy between artwork and visitor, and not to have this idea that as a visitor, especially as a white, male, straight visitor, you could like possess the space and the room. And we try to think about this here for Zurich as well. How do we recreate such an experience that can be a bit challenging to a usual public? And this idea of also splitting the exhibition across different spaces was a bit that as well. If you're targeted by the exhibition, if you feel concerned, if you feel addressed by the exhibition, the information is coming to you, you easily get your hand on the information, you understand how to navigate those 3 different locations, the public program, all of that. I mean, all of you being here tonight is an example, right? And otherwise, you're having a coffee at noon at Dan's house, and you might stumble upon 3 videos and see them, and miss the flyer, and miss the information. And you might have a very fragmentary experience of the exhibition. Or if you go to Shedhalle, you're seeing their exhibition Protozone 4, and you see 3 works as part of the exhibition, and you completely miss the point that these works are actually part of another exhibition, which includes 15 other works. But that's also okay, because actually the person we want to address with the exhibition, they find their way to navigate that. Whereas the rest of the public is more than welcome, but has to make the effort of understanding and locating and orienting themselves. And I think regarding this way, who am I doing that for, and how am I offering something without selling myself somehow? I think that's something we really try to do with this exhibition. Think, okay, who is our public, and who do we want to welcome and accommodate in this exhibition, and who is also welcome to come, but is not the ones who are pampered and are spoiled by the exhibition. We need to make an effort. Yeah. So those are the kinds of formats I think that, I mean, for me, I hope we can discuss about that, or I think perhaps it's also time to open the discussion maybe, if also you have questions. I still have in mind this idea of the institution and this coming from grassroots, becoming an institution, and what do you do? If you create more projects, how do you replace? Perhaps it's also, so when the public has an opinion about it. Also comments about the exhibition, about your experiences of the different projects of UV or of Zurich Moons or of the Bowl.
I mean, I just had a comment there, just hearing about the way you devised and the thinking behind the exhibition, the way it's spread over the city. And just in relation to this idea of community and how we talk so much about community building, and just that, often communities are formed by the people they exclude, so we're believing in this one thing, and I felt like there's something really nice about the way you described it, the kind of expanded community, the accidental person you slips into it for a moment. And I feel like sometimes we should speak more about spirit building or something, right? Or like, yeah, or expanded community, or you know, intersectionality of communities or something. It's just a thought. I just thought it.
But it's funny because we had a surprising discussion yesterday with Violeta. We were talking about the word community. And I was saying I'm a bit uncomfortable as a Swiss person with the word community because I feel this is extremely strong in the US American vocabulary, and I don't think the social structure in Europe, especially in Switzerland, is really community based. And I rather use the word collective or collectivity. But then we were talking with Violeta in Spanish, and he told me, no. Because the thing is, because I think community has also very quickly to do with communitarianism, which, you know, can become self-ghettoization or something like that. And Violeta was telling me, at least in Argentinian Spanish, it's the word collectivity that actually means this communitarianism and this self-ghettoization.
Yeah.
And so she was like, no, we cannot use collective, we cannot use collectivity. And I was like, what about community? So thank you for your suggestion. Let's find another word.
It was interesting, this conversation yesterday, and the same conversation we have, Simon, with different words when I started research for Campfire 3 years ago, because, well, Carrie is not here, but we are 3 different curators from different countries, with different culture, with different language, so find out one word when we need to make the text, exhibition text, oh my god, no, what's the worst thing in my life? I say, well, I don't make the text because no, it's impossible. 3 a Swedish, American, Argentinian, come on, no, stop, it's too much for me. But it's interesting because the word and the meaning are super different. I know the context. I love the community word.
It's very different. Like, also like talking about ballroom, and who needs that? You know, like when you come from Brazil or from the US, or even in the ghettos of Paris, where it's like the epicenter in Europe, who needs that? And when you come here and you see how wealthy people are normally, of course, there's always ghettos everywhere, wherever you go, but it's a wealthy country. And then again, who needs that, you know? And a lot of people think that they need that, but whenever ballroom calls them to really do the work, you know, the education, to take someone who is like an immigrant who just got here yesterday and has no housing, and we as a house has to like find ways to make this person like have a roof over their head, have like something to eat, you know, have a community. We aren't even talking about this person coming to a ball and do stunts like crazy dance stunts. We're not talking about that. We're talking about catering for our community. We're talking about, you know, like this kind of stuff. It's amazing that so many social problems regarding queer and trans people are turned to me, you know. I was like, I don't even have an education on social work, you know, but you can look in our DMs, the amount of people that comes to me and to the house to say like, hey, we have like something happening in the community, like can you help how we can moderate it, can you help like to have funds for this person, for that person, for this person, and we're like, we never say no, you know, we never say no. But then again, in the other side, there is people that think that they need ballroom and they really want to learn, and they come for 1, 2, 3 classes, or they do like a module of Vogue, and then they know some moves and win a trophy, and then things like, I'm part of the community, but where were you when we were really needing like your help to be there in the front and help us find place for people who had no place to live, or you know, like to be there with us when we are going through hardships, you know, to produce a party, to send money to communities, because that's mainly what we do. with when we have like an extra of money we send to communities, you know, in Brazil, in Ghana, in Suriname, and all of those places, you know. And it's crazy how the word community is subverted, and you clearly see who is saying that word and for what are they trying to say with that word, you know. This word is, for me, is a joker, you know. It's a total joker for me, you know. I know why I say it, and I'm gonna keep saying it, but for whoever say this to me, you better know where, you know, you better know. Because I can see through you. I'm sorry.
So how to build community through curating, or not curating.
Or how to rethink the ways in which we act in whatever we're doing, you know, and question that and over and over and over and over and again and again and again. I have no formula and I have no recipe.
But I think it's also like awareness building, you know? I mean, like in the communities, because we have so many, I mean, in the queer community especially, we have so many groups as well, you know? And just recently it started opening up also with the work from Ivy, with the work from Dominic and Brian, and with so many other people that we're doing also open mics and trying to put everyone together and to talk about things that consider those, like that affect those certain groups in the communities in itself, and so to say like how can we build this connection to each other, and then also say like, listen, your problems are not more important than my problems, and that we can say like, okay, we can have like an equal standing in a way. Yeah. Whereas it's at the moment it's very hard just to have this equal standing sometimes in the communities, I feel.
And sometimes it takes time for an equal standing, you know? And then we need understanding.
Exactly.
You know, and it's really okay not to be equal, but it's okay to know like this person is gonna take time to reach equality, whatever that means. I don't even know what that means. It's just an utopia for me, you know. But it takes time, and then you have to know, like, because it's gonna take time for you to get here, and not say bye or like I'm gonna wait, but it's like how can I help you, you know?
I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe it just also really needs a lot of, in terms of what we initially started talking about, care, curare, curating, just so much time to listen and to try to respond to certain needs and urgencies that people have, but remain in somewhat the dialogue. I think it's also, you know, that different people get to speak and different people get to chip in and different people, yeah. I have so much in my head right now. Also the term queer, I was just, because it came over and over and over and over. And I also wonder, like, for me that is almost already institutionalized in a way, you know, maybe, and I tend to then move away from these things a little bit.
Do you know what I remember once? I remember once I was like, I don't know what I was writing, but I was writing, maybe it was just like trying to summarize a performance or something, and it was somehow, I was working together with you, and I was like, can you check this? And then you were reading, I was like, why queer? Why is this queer? And I was like, true. I don't need to say this, you know. It's just like, why are we still talking about this? You know, sometimes I was like, why are we still talking about this? And I think for me, the word community is getting there when I was like, why are we still talking about this? If you really need to talk about this, you really don't know what's happening. You're not practicing, you know? If you need to say that you are something, probably it's because you need affirmation of that still.
That's actually very
You know?
interesting because it's something we've extremely deconstructed in the exhibition. The use of this word. I think it's something also from the first to the second.
But you know, like I'm not saying that is. I'm also not saying that is wrong.
No,
You know, like it's good for you to self-affirm yourself in order for you to grow. You know, and I'm not saying that it's wrong for people to use the word queer. I'm not saying that it's wrong for people to use community. But Marc knew that I could understand that I don't need that.
But that's where I'm getting.
You know?
That's where I'm getting at also with the show. I mean, because we have this show that's called Campfires, the body as a queer stage, and for a moment we had deleted the subtitle for the second edition, and then we put it again because we thought this notion of stage is very important, especially the concept of stage, and then thinking of José Esteban Muñoz as his idea of queer stage, right? And performance as a rehearsal of identity, and which is very much in echo to what the exhibition is. But then I think we also define queer in the exhibition text where we think, you know, dissident bodies, which is what we identify as queer in the broadest sense, which has less to do with sexual orientation or gender identity, you know, but way more about how one exists in the world, up to the point that you can say nobody is queer, the world makes someone queer, because the world is not accepting the way one person is positioned, right? And so ultimately being a white gay man in Switzerland is perhaps not such a queer experience in comparison to being just a woman in Afghanistan right now, you know? And so this idea of queerness more as an experience is also something we're trying to deconstruct queer as an identity and more speak of queerness as an experience. And actually the day or the week of the opening I contacted Violeta and Ariana and Linda and I said, oh my god, we need to change the subtitle again.
Panic.
Flyers were printed, everything.
Can't we go back to deviant?
No, but it was like, I just said, it's not the body as a queer stage, it's the queer body as a stage.
And just to add, it was in no way, I wasn't in no way referring to the exhibition.
No, I know, but I mean, that really brings something, I mean, that really
Good,
brings
so let's start with me first.
because I think regarding what we're trying to do, I think this is also this questioning, as you say, questioning, re-questioning, and adapting, you know, and you said listening, but also I think being flexible. And I think, again, this exhibition, for us, it was that as well. I don't think we're building community with the exhibition. It was not the point in Zurich. We've got no community to build in Zurich, you know. It exists. It's here. What we're trying to do is just to point at it for a moment to the general public. We don't have the pretension that we're coming here and building a community. But what we're trying to do with that exhibition at Travels, it's the exhibition that's flexible. The exhibition has changed. It's the same title, it's the same list of artists almost. It's a completely different exhibition because the public is different. And so I think the flexibility is also there for us. And I think that's really a key aspect. Yeah. Okay, it's been an hour and a half. I don't know if you're still like, I think we need a fresh air. But the show remains open if you want to have a look at it for a moment. And we can continue conversation outdoors. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.